Hey everyone, hope you all are well. So after my last video using the Wild West palette, I got a couple of comments suggesting that I try a different primer, so that's what I'm doing now. I'm using a touch of the MAC Painterly Paint Pot as suggested to prep my eyes for the shadows to come. It's funny because I did find that I got on better this time, but I don't know if it was the neutral side of the palette or the base that made the difference. But funny that you would think it would work best with Urban Decay's own primer, but sure look. Anyway, I created a blue look last time, so I'm using the brown tones today and I'm kicking off the look with the shade Nudie. This is like a peachy warm brown and it's a great shade to use as a transition for the other shadows to come. Based on how it looked in the pan, I wasn't expecting it to be as pigmented, or I suppose I should say as dark as it was. I expected it to be lighter, more of a lighter peachy shade, but I'm not mad. I really like it. I like how it applied. I didn't find it hard to blend. And as you can see, I'm really just working it into the crease of the eye now and blending it upwards and outwards towards the brow bone. It was a little powdery in the pan when I dipped my brush into it, but in terms of fallout down onto the face, it was minimal, especially when used with a brush like this, but you'll see what I mean now in a minute. And it's also a shade that I didn't notice fading with over time, unlike a couple of the other shades in the palette. So overall, I'm quite pleased with how this one layered. It layered up nicely and I've just got no complaints. I'm using a small bullet shaped brush now to blend this shadow down along the lower lash line. It applied and blended fine with a fluffy brush, but with a small dense brush and sweeping motions, even though I tapped off the excess, you can see the powder literally flying. So now with a dense brush anyway, it's going to pack on more shadow, so bear this in mind. But if you're applying it down along the lower lash line, maybe tap the way across as opposed to sweeping your brush. Next then, I'm taking the shadow Ghost Town, and I love tones like these in a palette because they work well with my blue eyes. This is a warm orange toned matte brown. Now I should say as well, my hay fever has been acting the ham recently and my eyes have been streaming, causing the sides of my eyes to dry out. So that's why I was pointing to the flakiness on the outer corner there. That's exactly what it is. Anyway, I'm tapping this colour into the crease and I'm working on blending it across into the crease using little back and forward sweeping motions and then circular motions as well, and I'm buffing it down on the outer third of the lid and then gradually sweeping it out at an angle to give me a nice elongated shape to the eyes. I really love this shade. As I said, the orange in it helps my eye colour to really pop. It's another shade that blends very nicely. I'm adding it now in a couple of layers just to build up the intensity, but it actually isn't necessary. It's quite pigmented on its own. It's another shadow as well that I didn't have an issue with fading, and again, fallout wise with a blending brush, it wasn't really an issue. It was when I switched to the small dense brush like the shadow before. So now I'm sweeping the shadow down along the lower lash line. I'm making sure as well to connect it up on that outer edge as always. Again, as I mentioned, like the previous shadow, you can see we've a bit of fallout. But I'm then going back in with a little brush that I use to apply powder under my eyes. And with a quick sweeping motion, I can usually dust the shadow off the face because it's just sitting on top of the skin. But this actually just smeared into the skin, which is not ideal. So I just cleaned it up a bit off camera and then we're good to go again. Then I'm taking the eyeshadow Whiskey, and I've used this shadow before. This time though, I loaded up my eyeshadow brush with the product. Like, I really gave my brush a good coating, and now I'm starting by tapping this shadow down on the outer third of the eyelid, and then I'm using circular motions, quite large ones now, to coat that area, and then I'm pulling it up into the crease. This time I can see a difference with this shadow. I don't know if it's the MAC Paint Pot or if it's just the fact that maybe this particular shadow didn't layer well over the teal shades. I'm not really sure, but it's definitely working better this time. I will try it again just out of curiosity because with the Urban Decay Primer Potion, you know, it didn't really perform that well. And I want to see if it is the Primer Potion or if it's the other shadows. Who knows? Anyway, I'm happy with how it performed this time, so that's all that matters. Once again then, I'm taking that bullet shaped brush because what I do to the top, I'm doing to the bottom. So I'm sweeping that Whiskey shade down along there, keeping it mainly to the outer third, but I am fading it across the rest of the lash line just to blend it in with what I applied previously. Then I'm taking the eyeshadow Rustler, and this is a lovely warm reddy golden bronze shade and it's got a metallic finish. I've sprayed my brush with the Urban Decay All Nighter setting spray to make those shimmery particles pop, but also because when the shadow is wet it's going to stick to the lid, so I'll have less fallout, hopefully none. So I'm just pressing and packing the shadow onto the lid and blending it across into that whiskey shadow now, and I'm really happy with how this shade performed. I'm then taking the NARS pencil Last Frontier, and I'm using this then to line my waterline, and I'm just running it over and back, and then I'm closing my eye around the pencil to line both the top and bottom waterline. To finally add some depth then, I'm taking the shade Pony Up, and I wouldn't have really combined this shadow with the rest of the look because of the tone, but it was the darkest shadow in the palette, so that's why I went for it. I can't resist a bit of depth. I'm using a tapered blending brush then just to blend this shadow onto the outer portion of the lid. I'm taking it from the lid then up into the crease using circular motions, making sure as well that it really blends well on that outer edge, and then I'm fading what's left on my brush then across into the crease. Once I'm happy with how that looks, I'm switching to an angled brush, and I'm using that same shadow down along the lower lash line, pressing and wriggling it into the lash line so we have a nice fade from the dark brown on the waterline down underneath the lash line. Again, it's a shadow that's a bit powdery and nearly blinded me, but we move on. I know, I'm just a bit dramatic. My eyes are very sensitive in water, so it's not ideal. I'm pressing the shadow now as well along the upper lash line from outer to inner corner, just to add a bit of depth there too. Finally then, just to make sure everything is nice and soft and blended, I'm running a clean blending brush around the edges of the look. It looks a little messy on that outer portion of the eye, but again, that's just down to the flakiness that I have there, nothing to do with really the shadows. I've added some of the Ardell Wispy lashes, and now I'm using the Urban Decay Lash Freak mascara to coat the bottom lashes and then to blend my own lashes in with the false ones, and that's it. So I definitely got on a lot better this time around. The neutral tones in the palette were much easier to work with, as one of you suggested. But if only half the palette is decent, it's really no use. I'm still conflicted on this one. I'll have to use it a few more times, but definitely on the fence. I want to love it, but they're making it hard work. Anyway, let me know your thoughts, and I'll catch you all soon.